Thank you. Right.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
Two in the box!
Ready to go.
We be fast and
They be slow.
Wow. A second Super Saiyan? Second in order, perhaps, but by no means in stature. Your fight is with me now.
I'll have my revenge. And Deathstalker too.
Man, I can't fucking believe this. Another basement, another elevator. How can the same shit happen to the same guy twice?
Oh, please, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
The future starts this spring in March with Friday the 13th, A New Beginning.
Severe trauma at age 12. Brutal self-defense murder of a psychopathic killer.
If Jason still haunts you, you're not alone.
You'll find we're very different from the state institution. We don't have any guards here. Nobody's gonna tell you what you can do or what you can't do.
You take a joke?
What you're really doing here, Tommy, is preparing yourself to re-enter society and start a new life. Well, they've given him every therapy they can think of. It's a wonder his mind isn't fried with all the drugs they've given him. They say here that his violent outbursts have subsided. That he's well on his way to a complete recovery.
Friday the 13th, A New Beginning.
Hey again, everyone. This is your host, Cris at Inside the Sequel, the podcast where we talk about sequel films. You know what this is. This is the home for sequel movies that don't get enough love. They don't get enough attention, and maybe people forget or don't know that they exist. So we bring them to light here, and we just kind of champion them or, just acknowledge them. And we want to thank you for tuning in again. If you're new for the first time, consider following the podcast. You can find us at anywhere you find your podcast streamings. If you're tuning in again, I hope you listened and enjoyed our last episode where we talked about 1985's Howling 2 with Doug McCambridge from Good Times, Great Movies. But I am very excited for today's episode because we first-time guest. He is a published author. He was a writer for Chud.com. I don't know if you still are, but he was also in the special... but he's also been in the special features for Resident Evil from 2002, playing the Living Dead featurette, which I'm excited to talk about with him. I have Mark Wheaton here. Mark, how are you?
Very well. How are you? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Dude, I'm so good. I'm excited. I'm happy to have you on. We finished our first year on this podcast. If you told me a year ago I'd have you on here, I would have thought, no way in hell. That would have been crazy. But no, I'm happy to have you, man. How are you doing? What have you been up to?
I just type all day, and sometimes somebody sends me a check and sometimes they don't. And then I take my kids to school, and that is literally the whole cycle of my life. So
a literal dream of film fans right now.
This is true. The worst days are where you wake up and you don't know what you're working on that day. And I've managed to reduce those to almost zero. So every day I'm like, oh yeah, I have to type this thing today. So right. That's all you can hope for as a writer. You got something to fill the pages with that day. Right.
And I'll just get it out of the way now because I've been a big fan of yours since when I was like 13 years old when I watched Resident Evil. I loved playing the video games. You were in that special feature and you talked about some classic films and you were just really into the history of zombie films. And I was just absolutely like enamored by that because I was such a movie nerd growing up. And you really turned me on to some horror movies. And I always remember that special feature.
Oh, right. Yeah. That was Jeff Schwartz was the guy who makes all those. I was on like that one, like Bulletproof Monk. He was one of those guys who'd email you and be like, I'm doing this stuff for Resident Evil. I know you were like covering it for Fangoria. Can you give me like an hour? And you'd be like, yeah, sure. And now he's like this Peabody Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker. like pumping movies onto HBO all the time, but he was out there making all the special back when DVDs had those docs. So Jeff Schwartz.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't even know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's back in the days of special edition DVDs. There was like 5 main producers who go out there and just make documentaries for 100 different movies like a month. So yeah.
Dude, you remember like those awesome DVD special features? You don't get those too much on like Blu-rays anymore unless you spend it on a boutique label.
I miss the really great commentaries. Like when I miss Anchor Bay when Bill Lustig was there, and he was like, I visited them for Fango once, and he was just like, you have to see this. And he played like they were doing some special edition of some Italian crime film, like Revolver or something. And he was playing the score. It was like an old Ennio Morricone score. You've never seen somebody so excited about getting to release something that like 400 people were waiting for. And that enthusiasm from the director of Maniac was so infectious. And going to Anchor Bay was always like such a treat because he was like, he was a kid in a candy store of his own making. So those were good times back then.
Yeah, man. I would say like some of my like the Resident Evil special feature for the first Resident Evil is like my favorite one. The next one I would put up there would be not Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street one special feature, and just for all those on the DVD. And then oddly enough, I would probably say it was Ridley Scott's 1979 like when it came out 2003, the DVD release of that, and his commentary was terrific on that. And cool. It's like a staple all the time in every re-release of Alien. But yeah, I love bonus features. Like I don't want to sound snobby. I'm not like one of those Criterion buyers who's like, I just need to see what's on the supplements and push up my glasses, you know. And it's some of those things you like just kind of like, you know, live in your brain rent free, you know.
Yeah, the commentary to what is it? What's the Soderbergh, The Limey, where basically the whole commentary is the screenwriter cursing out Soderbergh, being like, why didn't you make the movie I wrote? And Soderbergh's like, yeah, I'll try better next time. And like, you just have Jim Lowell sitting there being like, this was better on the page. And Soderbergh's just kind of like, I don't even know what to tell you. And I had a friend, I'm not going to say their names, but I heard a commentary that people I worked with made. And one guy's like drinking away, making fun of the director's trying so hard to give his horror film a good commentary. And the screenwriters, and he kept being like, this was an homage to this, and this was an homage to this. And the screenwriter, who's very smart, took a drink and says, yeah, we had to do reshoots because the director saw a few more movies to homage to. And you just hear the producers being like, shut up. And you can tell they edited it out, but they were so furious at him for like just trashing on the commentary, the director in the film. And I was like, that's good work that day. So
that's awesome. That's like me going on a podcast, on someone else's podcast, and they coming back on mine and be like, oh my God, you won't freaking believe what happened on this podcast. And then they're like, hey, thanks a lot for that. I'm kidding. That doesn't happen. But I hate to just keep like, you know, gushing, but I always remember when he would talk about the history of zombies, because it's funny. Resident Evil for me is one of my favorite zombie. I love that whole franchise. I binged through it. And the zombie genre has become kind of coming back in the Korean film. I know we're talking about it today, but it's coming back in Korean filmmaking. And you remember that time between like 2009 to like 2015 where everything was a zombie movie or something to like zombie related. But I always remember when you would talk about the bridge between White Zombie, I Walk with a Zombie, you even mentioned, all the way bridging it to Nightmare or Night of the Living Dead. And I'm just like, oh man, like I didn't know at the time, but I knew now. I'm looking back, I'm like, I'm just like him. Like I'm totally like about that sweet era, you know. Like I love Zack Snyder's, you know, Dawn of the Dead, but now watching 2 of those 3 movies, I haven't still seen White Zombie, but I did just pick it up on Kino's sale. I'm totally with you. I'm like, yeah, this is good stuff.
Well, it's weird because it's every few decades when there's zombie movies, they become something else. And now it's this real, just apocalyptic doomsday pandemic kind of thing, which it absolutely wasn't when when they were doing I Walked with a Zombie or White Zombie. They were racist. They were kind of xenophobic, kind of weird racist pieces. And it was this very different thing. And then Night of the Living Dead comes along, and you got like actual brain eaters, and you have it be a totally different metaphor. That's why when you sent the thing about what are the great sequels, I was like, Dawn of the Dead, because they reinvent zombies again about consumer culture. They're just a great catch-all for using to make, all horror films are political, but zombie movies are just made for politics. So it's great to watch them get reinvented and reinvented and reinvented.
Yes. So that brings me to a good point. You're the first time guest, and everyone knows who's listened to this podcast before. For new first time guest, I got asked, like, are you a sequel guy? Like, what are some of your give me some of those sequels you stan? And I don't want to hear any slander on other sequels right now. That's for off the mic.
Trying to think. I actually thought about this, and I'm like, my first response is all like Return of the Pink Panther, because Christopher Plummer's so great in it. But then I was like, I should probably do horror ones. So I was like Dracula's Daughter, which I really like, where Lon Chaney's, it's the one where Lon Chaney's kind of Dracula, but the daughter is like seducing all the women alone. It's like a really great, like beautifully made movie. And it was very erotic at a time that they simply didn't make movies like that. And they kind of slipped a lot of stuff. And that's a great sequel. But like I grew up on stuff like Evil Dead 2 and the Friday the 13th sequels. But then, like in college, I would see stuff like Drunken Master 2, like all the Once Upon a Time in China sequels, Project A Part 2, like all the Crime Story, the Police Story movies, like these endless franchises that Jackie Chan and Jet Li were doing. They would screen them at my college, and so I might not even remember which one was which, but I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the Once Upon a Time in China that was in the Old West, and then. Drunken Master 2 was the one where the mom like fights too. So it's just, there's endlessly great sequels. So just, especially if you're a genre fan. So
yeah, I think like obviously the horror genre is the easiest to gravitate towards with the sequel movies, but the more I've been doing this podcast, the more I've expanded. There's some amazing non-horror sequels that I've just either not given notice to, or like even just like visit the franchise, and that's, when you bring up martial arts movies, it's kind of like candy. Like there's just so many different options. They kind of look the same, but they are different in their own way. When I went through the Police Story, I went all the way to the all first three. And Police Story 3 Super Cop is phenomenal when it comes to martial arts sequel movies. And that's cool to hear that Once Upon a Time I don't know if you've been secretly listening to the podcast talking about Criterion movie releases right now. And it's like, but it's all good.
Paddington 2. There's another good sequel. Paddington 2.
The safest choice. Safest sequel movie choice. Everyone loves the Paddington films. Yeah.
And Star Trek 2. That's probably another safe choice. But then you go super safe, like Godfather 2 and Empire Strikes Back and all that crap. So,
So we talk about sequel movies that don't get enough love or attention. We've covered
Beverly Hills
Chihuahua,
you're right.
too.
Paddington 2 gets plenty of love. You're absolutely right. So.
It's like, starting next year, we're going to be doing things like Cats vs. Dogs 2, The Revenge of Kitty Galore, and Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties. It's like that kind of. We're heading that way in this podcast.
That's excellent. It's sad because that's from my era of screenwriting. And I'm like, I know all of those people. I remember how hard fought it was for the producers of Final Destination, Warren Zidek and Craig Perry, to make Cats and Dogs 2 up in Bangkok. It's funny when you're on the other side and you're just like, it's like, oh yeah, Boogeyman 2. And I'm like, yeah, I was attached to that for a while. There's the whole other side of like the sequel universe, like, oh yeah, remember when they were rebooting The Grudge? And like, yeah, I pitched a fire thing on it. They talked to 50 about. It's weird being on the inside of the endless sequels that are never made, but are just endlessly developed. And it just like, wow, they're still trying to milk just a little more out of some franchise. So I don't know.
They're doing a new Final Destination film too. It got announced.
Exciting. It is. They were trying to make I don't know if I should I think they were trying to make one period, Final Destination 1666 for a while, but now it's the woman's writing it. It's a new they're starting the whole franchise over again. So
yeah, I think
that'll
it's
be
just going to be
fun.
called Final Destination. Like every new remake's reboot movie, like the new Scream is just called Scream.
Yeah. But on the paperwork, it's funny because the Friday the 13th I worked on the paperwork, it says Friday the 13th Part 12. But on the poster, it says Friday the 13th. So it just, you get that, but it's filed and contracted and like all spelled out as, and with the Writers Guild as Friday the 13th Part 12. So who knows what they actually say at New Line on the document. So
I don't know. This is why I had you on, just so I can get like my sneaky links of like what's going on in Hollywood right now. Rumor has it they're going to do a Hellfest 2, which I'm excited for, but then they're going to do a Malignant 2, and now I'm all mad. So,
oh, I had no idea. Oh my God. Oh well. You know,
these are totally made up things.
why
I just
not?
wanted to get a reaction to the comments for that one.
It's funny because I remember I was working at Ghost House on Messengers, and I got put right onto Boogeyman 2. And because Boogeyman was an accidental hit. And I just, it's funny. I just really liked hanging out with Rob Tappert as like an Evil Dead guy. You go out for like lunch with Tappert and he just tell you amazing stories. It was really fun to hang out with him. He's like, what about Boogeyman 2? I'm like, why not? And so I signed on and we signed the contract. We were doing it. But then they realized there wasn't enough interest, like Mandate and Lionsgate, whoever was involved in it, was like, we can't go theatrical with it. So you're fired and we're going to do a straight to video one instead. And I'm like, I think we like high-fived and went and pitched some TV show or something. But it was just, you're constantly in the sequel universe. And then when Messengers 2 was coming around, they were like, hey, we're going to do Messengers 2, but we're going to use Todd's old script and change the names. And we're going to just use that as a prequel script. And I was like, that's amazing. I think Todd and I like emailed, we're like, they're going to just use your script and they're going to make a whole movie they're going to make a sequel out of one of the 15 drafts from Messengers. That's insane. And it just happened. And that's, I don't know, that's Hollywood. So
that is crazy. Now,
none of this, but that's how it works.
Now I always knew I'd make it to Hollywood, and you're my direct link there now. So if you need like a small like puff piece article on a straight to DVD or straight to Tubi sequel, I'm your guy for it. Excellent. There you go. This is actually just a job interview podcast episode. But we are talking about, coincidentally, from last week's episode, we're talking about another 1985 film. We were talking about Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. And you requested this one. Tell me about that.
There's so much to say about Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. But when I was a kid, I'd watch them all. Like, when I was a kid, I think they'd made up through 8. I remember seeing a poster for 8 in Dallas when I was little and being like, that looks nuts. What's that? And my mom being like, you're 4. You can't see that movie. But then kind of my sister and I would tape them. And we never knew which one, we never kind of caught the title. So they were all interchangeable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 were all just kind of interchangeable. And we'd watch them over and over and over again. And when I went to University of Texas, the head of playwriting there was David Mark Cohen, who has like co-story by and co-screenplay credit on Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Yeah.
And I went into his office once and he had the poster there. I was like, oh, I'm like a fan of Friday the 13th. I'm like, oh, that must have been fun. And he looked at me like I was a moron. And he's just like, what are you crazy? And I'm just like, yeah, I guess obviously I don't know what horrors are making Paramount horror sequels. He died sadly not long after that, but he was my mentor. I was in class with like Mark Duplass and like Pam Ribbon, who went and wrote Moana, and like he was this amazing mentor for playwriting students at the University of Texas. And he also wrote Friday the 13th, Part 5. So I became really interested in the fact that people hate the movie. People hated Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Yes.
He had a miserable time on the project. So why did I enjoy it? And so I spent a lot of time with the movie, and you start picking it apart. And when I got a chance to pitch on the reboot sequel, the one that followed Freddy versus Jason,
The killer
I
cut.
realized I was facing a lot of the same questions that David did when he had to follow up 4. Where do you go after the franchise is out? In his case, where do you go after Jason's dead? What do you do with the audience in that case? And the way they solve all of those crazy questions are insane. And that's why New Beginning is so wild to watch, because they turn it into this very subtle, clue-ridden whodunit, thinking that the audience is showing up being like, oh, who's the new Jason? The audience showed up being like, oh no, Jason's back to life. It's fine. But they were like, no, is it Roy? Is it this kid? Is it the Drifter? Is it Tommy himself? So they made it this whole murder mystery with all these blind alleys. And it's actually a really interesting movie, but it's not what anyone wanted to see. So what a film.
I'll be honest, Mark, when it's like cinema. It's like Chef's Kiss, like cinema. I was, when you said you were going to want to do this sequel, you just right off the bat, you were like Friday 5. And I was like taken back because I was like, December horror, Friday the 13th, gasp, no way. But I'm down for it because, I mean, what the hell else am I going to talk about in December if not like, crazy sequel movies that I would want to enjoy? Because I've never saw this one until you pitched it. And I have seen Fridays 1 through 4. I've seen 6. I've seen 7. And I've seen The Killer Cut. And I've seen Jason X, Partially Drunk, and Freddy versus Jason. And 5 was just one I just never really saw. And I was like, I got to binge through all of them again just to get to 5. But then I was like, no. It's like, I'll watch 4 and 5. And because like 4 is 4 is an awesome Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
And then watching 5 right after it the same night, I was so invested in, like you said, the whodunit. I was like, this is a weirder Friday the 13th. It just, the tone is different. It's like it's weird because we just came off talking about Star Wars and I won't stop. It's kind of like watching the sequel or the original trilogy and then going to watch the prequels, just like a different vibe, a different universe of the same thing. Because like 1 through 3 kind of has the same kind of tone and, that's a trilogy. Then 4 is so different. And then you put 5 with it and 6, it totally fits. And I'm not going to lie, as a first time viewer of Friday 5, I'm not the biggest Friday the 13th person. I really enjoy a lot of the ones that are in the entire franchise. I have the box set. But it's like 5 is a strong candidate for me. Like I really enjoy 5. And even I was involved with, I was like wondering, like, don't tell me just going to be Tommy at the end of it. Please don't tell me just that. I was pleasantly surprised with like the reveal. I thought it was interesting.
It's weird because if you see it as a pseudo remake of the first film, where it's the mom, it's Roy did it because his kid got killed by these kids at this camp, or in this case, Pinehurst Center for Wayward Children. It's at the end of the day, it's a remake of the first film. It's a parent's revenge because ultimately Friday the 13th, with its Sean Cunningham connection to Last House on the Left, is kind of doing the same thing as Last House on the Left. A child is killed and the parents take revenge. And so Friday the 13th is a remake of Last House on the Left, is a remake of Virgin Spring. So when you come into Friday the 13th part 5, you're saying, how do we start it new? How do we replicate the success of the first film? And so they kind of do that, but then they keep Tommy and you start this kind of, I've never accepted 4, 5, and 6 as like the kind of Tommy trilogy because it doesn't work. Because 6 then takes so much of 5. They have the same opening scene. Tommy goes to a grave, Jason's resurrected.
Except Jason's...
One time it's a dream, then it's lightning bolt, and this series changes forever because now he's a mummy and he's supernatural and he can't defeat him. So it's a complete 6 changes the whole franchise. So I don't know. But in 5's defense, like lift a binder up of just here's why 5 is actually great. In the first films, They're all at Crystal Lake. They never
Mhm.
break out. 4, you go to a convenience store.
Mhm.
The cops are never involved. In 5, the mayor is screaming at the cops, being like, what's this Jason stuff? Suddenly, Jason's in the real world. He pulls out of Roy's thing, like the newspaper articles about the
Mhm.
Jason killings at Crystal Lake, except there's like a press photo of Jason, like kind of with it, and you're like, who took that picture? But it's just, you have all of these things of Jason in the real world that start feeding out in 5 that they just took whole cloth in 6. And they started bringing in cops. They started making Jason unstoppable. They started bringing in people beyond just camp counselors. There's all this stuff in 5 that, as wonkily executed as it is, then became the second half of the Friday the 13th franchise.
Mhm.
So I don't know. There's a case to be made for that film. And the kills are great, sort of.
I
There's
think they're
just-
strong.
But you never see the mask. That's the weird thing about 5. You don't see the mask until like 20 minutes to the end. You just see the hands again, like in the first film.
Mhm.
So you don't actually, you could play it both ways that it's not Jason. Except you see the mask, the red mask with the hatchet that Tommy sees in visions. It's the real Jason. And then you see the Roy mask with the little blue streaks. And they thought audiences would pick up on that. They thought, oh, there's going to be that audience out there that knows there's 2 different Jasons here. No, didn't happen. Not at all. Not for years. So
I just think it's just a breakaway from like the similar formula that 1 through 3 had. And full disclosure, Friday the 13th Part 2 is my favorite Friday the 13th. But this one just feels like such a breakaway that 4 kind of did, that I really enjoy. And it's weird because I kept thinking when watching this feels like an odd mix of Halloween 2 and Dream Warriors from Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's before Dream Warriors and right after Halloween 2. So it's like in this weird like mix of like being original while also taking away from another, franchise. But Friday the 13th for me has always been like the Halloween copycat of sorts, and then eventually gets its footing and runs off with it, for better or for worse. And I really enjoyed that because like I like movie, because my biggest problem, except for 2, because I like 2 a lot, with 1 through 3, well, 1 and 3 is like I don't care as much about the teenagers or the bonding with the characters. They're just fodder for Jason or Mrs. Voorhees. But then 4 kind of gets you like Crispin Glover's in it,
Yeah.
and then you get Feldman, and you kind of enjoy some of those characters. And then 5, it gives you a community of characters that are so enjoyable. And it's kind of like, I'm a sucker for these kind of sequel movies, because like the best thing sequel movies could do is give you side characters that you oddly fall in love with or care about, and you hope they don't die at the end.
Like, as you say, like Friday the 13th Part 2. There are people in Friday the 13th Part 2 and in 1 and definitely in 4 that you're like, no, that person shouldn't have been killed. That's ridiculous. And I still am bothered from stuff in Friday the 13th Part 4. I forget her name, but the woman, and it's just a throwaway kill. She's like the main character. She's the one who's supposed to survive this.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. And I was like, this is what Friday the 13th is. You make characters that people like, but it doesn't matter. You can be good, you can be bad, you can be anything. Jason eventually just becomes the hand of God. He just wipes out everybody and can't be stopped. In Jason X, they just blow up a whole space station full of millions of people for no reason. You're like, a whole lot of people just died because the ship went that way. He's not Freddy. Freddy's very targeted. It's like, I'm going to get this. There's a motive for Freddy's killings. Jason, every single human being is a version of the people that killed his mom. So that's it. So he kills everyone who comes into his path. And there's a certain brutalism to that, just motiveless stuff, that they stop him sometimes pretending to be the mom with the sweater and all, like in 2. But it doesn't matter. He comes back, and in 6, and you just can't do anything about him. So
I totally agree. I was like, I totally agree. And you see, Friday the 13th Part 5, again, first time watch, people who've watched it plenty of times like, like it's just like recency bias or something like that. Just the tone is different, and it's just the tone I kind of crave in my Friday the 13th. Like I like 6. I'll be honest, I think it's really fun. It's campy. This movie kind of doesn't have as much of that camp, but it has a lot of like awesome kills. Like and it feels kind of like not sleazy because I want to sound like pervertish.
It's
but
totally
like,
sleazy.
But it is like
completely sleazy.
It's nice sleazy. It's like what
it's
I want.
Grindhouse sleazy.
Right?
So.
It's like an Italian horror movie, but not an Italian horror movie, But director Steinman, we got to talk about. The man is like Wes Craven 2.0. And it's funny they brought up Last House on the Left because he was slated to do supposedly a House on the Left Part 2. But then he got to do this. He did Savage Streets with Linda Blair. Have you seen Savage Streets?
I have. I saw it back then when I was watching all these movies.
I remember catching my. I remember watching part of that movie with my roommate in college, and I was like, "This is a crazy movie."
Yeah.
Went back and watched it. I was like, "Oh, I like this movie."
Yeah, there's certain horror sequels of the 80s where you can feel the cocaine sweat on the negative. And I will honestly say Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, you kind of like, oh, wow, this is the scene. This is, you like, everybody did a line and then they just rolled. And you just, when they make coke jokes in the front seat of the car as she comes out of the diner, and you're just like, it's clear they wanted to have so much more cocaine like on film. They were just like, well, just do a little cocaine joke. And it's just, the movie, it's funny because then, as you say, with part six becomes very self-aware. Part 6 really understands that, we're in this universe where he's supernatural and you have to fight him, but you can't stop him. And the kills are all going to get set up. The clean kill of just the guy who stumbles across his girlfriend in part 5, and Jason just whips the belt around his eyes and bends the thing with the 2 metal rings and the branch. You're not going for like, oh, here's this crazy kill. You're going for, this is this insanely brutal thing. And it's simple and ugly. And there's a lot of that in part 5 with the shears, with like just cleavers in people's faces. There's not the, is it going to be this weapon or this weapon, and set up and set up. It's not. It's just these ugly, nasty, quick, brutal kills.
Well, that scene you mentioned with the belt whip, I mean, that's an infamous scene from people who, were working behind the scenes with the movie. It was slated to be a 3-minute sex scene, which it's already hot as it is. If you don't remember the scene outside with the 2, it's a pretty steamy scene, let alone. But yeah, 3 minutes. It seemed like a little excessive. Granted, Steinman was a previous porn director, and I could totally understand that. But I mean, Wes Craven did porn for a little bit. He wasn't, I don't feel that kind of sexiness, or that kind of sleaze from his movies. But
there was that great quote from the editor where they were watching it at Paramount that's in Crystal Lake Memories, and they were like watching it, and Green's like, what the hell do I do with this? This is, and it's like, make it look like a Pepsi commercial. I can hear so many that coming out of so many executives, just like, don't worry about it, kid, make it look like a Pepsi commercial. And I'm like, that just feels like, because they don't even care. It's just, you got to get it on 1,000 screens by next week. Just chop it up, make it look like this.
It almost is like, this isn't your dad's Friday the 13th, bucko.
Yeah.
This one's like a new kind of trend of like horror movies. In 1985, like you get something like The Howling, which is like, some of the kills and like the nudity make no sense. And in this movie, it's very deliberate, and it's kind of interesting to see that in a way, which in Friday the 13th, it's always felt, up until this point, it feels kind of dramatic, and like you care about romance and stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
The movie, there's no romance in this. If anything, there's just a simp romance.
It's ugly. Well, that's what's interesting, because the first 3 movies, where you have Cunningham directing the first, and then Steve Miner taking it over because he was editor on the first, and he worked on Last House. You have a real continuity. between the first 3 movies. And then 4, you get Savini back, and you have Joe Zito, who is a great director.
Yep.
And Paramount decides we're gonna do something here. People like these. And Final Chapter is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, oh shoot, let's just cash out and make a quick sequel with part 5. Like, they didn't have a plan. So
that's the thing. It's Zito did such a good job with 4, and apparently the script, he left the movie open-ended because he was hoping Paramount would be like, hey, come back and finish whatever you're doing. Basically what we hoped Disney was going to do for now I'm blanking out, for Rian Johnson's Last Jedi, which we never got. They just brought, it's almost like they brought Sean Cunningham back after the success of 4, made him do another Friday the 13th, which Sean Cunningham, sure, I get. Not my kind of tea when it comes to Friday the 13th. I think Steve Miner understands Friday the 13th to a T. But
there's a reason he went on to make so much more interesting stuff, like working in the Halloween movies. Like Halloween H2O gets, like, everybody hates Halloween H2O. There's weird stuff in that movie. That's an unusual, for a Dimension Who Cares sequel. When they kill Adam Arkin in that film and they just lift him out, and it's an ugly, brutal, feels like the late 70s kill in a movie that's otherwise been fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
And then, then he goes and directs the pilot of Dawson's Creek and never has to work again. So, Steve Miner.
Yeah, he's one of the goats when it comes to, like, horror movie directors for me. I love his stuff. But yeah, Steinman, he's just okay. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of, like, dark humor. Like, when I watched Midsommar for the first time, people were like, I was, like, visibly upset with the movie. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And everyone's like, it's a pitch black comedy breakup movie. And I'm like, what the fuck world are you living in? I'm like, no. But it's like, this movie, I kind of get the dark humor in it. It's slightly offensive and dated, but, like, I have a good time with the movie because it makes up with it after, let me check my clock. It's been 5 minutes. Okay. Now there's a kill scene.
Right.
I like it. It's a kind of bridging the gap of a type of Friday the 13th movie. It also gives
throughout everything. It's like, we're just going to kill somebody every 5 seconds. There's so many continuity errors in it, but you just get kill after kill. And here's another reason to love it. Henry Manfredini, who did the score on all of them, it's so good. I would say his work on 5, they finally were like, we really need you to stitch this movie together. And he's like, okay, it's my time to shine. And he delivers one of the best scores that he did for the entire franchise. I think 5 is incredible for what he was probably handed versus what he delivered. And it's amazing. So
yeah, it's kind of like when Tim Burton told Danny Elfman to, like, do the Batman score, and he didn't have to go that hard, but he really did go that hard for us. Also, here's a big thing about Friday the 13th Part 5. People, like, they don't like this movie. I've been going on Letterboxd. Mark, are you on Letterboxd?
No,
dude,
sadly.
You got to get on Letterboxd.
I am old.
Got to.
I am old. No, I'm on, like, Goodreads. That's where I am. I'm on Goodreads,
where all the authors are. I swear, the snob.
We're a sad lot, but there we are.
But I go on these Letterboxd, and people are ranking the Friday the 13th movies. I should probably do that soon. But I still haven't seen Jason Takes Manhattan, so I can't technically make that list yet. But
there's good stuff in Manhattan too. The ending is probably the worst one in the whole franchise, but there's some amazing stuff in that crazy movie. There's some great kills in that movie. So I even like that one.
Maybe, people like this episode enough and they want me to do a ranking of Friday the 13th. I'll do that. I mean, I did recently my Letterboxd review after the dreadful Halloween kills. I did my Halloween ranking. And I think I haven't heard back from some of my friends on Twitter. I think they might have gotten, like, a cardiac arrest or something, because I put Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2 is number 1. And then number 2, I put Season of the Witch. And then number 3, I put Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. So
see, I agree with that one. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is, like, one of the most underrated, weird, like, Halloween 1, his first Halloween, I totally is like, he's there too much. He's trying to do Halloween. He's trying to do his original. He's trying to do Carpenter. He's trying to do his original. when he comes in with Halloween 2, he's like, this will be a Rob Zombie film. And it's bizarre. It's finally him doing what he wanted to do. And it's a beautiful film. I love Halloween 2.
Mark, you just purchased your ticket for another appearance on this podcast. Because Halloween 2 kickstarts Rob Zombie's pre-A24 movie binge, because he does that and he does Lord Salem, which is totally A24's basically recipe book for all their movies after that. I think Robert Eggers gets everything based off Lords of Salem. I'm convinced. But yes, Mark, with those comments, you're going to be back on this podcast. Oh my God.
That's the sad thing. Rob Zombie, the amount of unmade projects that he hasn't gotten financed, that you come across, like his Final Days of Groucho Marx script, like all these projects that his Blob remake. There's so many insane Rob Zombie projects out there that didn't get made. And he was going to do like a Paul Lynde thing, or maybe I'm mixing him up with somebody else, but he has all these things that he was doing. He was doing the hockey movie. I'm hoping that the Munsters thing might put him back somewhere where he's back to doing just whatever he wants to do, because sometimes his like an off Rob Zombie project is still more interesting than half the other stuff that's out there. So he's such a weird filmmaker.
Yes. Oh my God. If there's anyone who's going to tackle a Texas Chainsaw Massacre Friday the 13th movie, it's going to be Rob Zombie. He's going to do it right. I need him to do that. I need him to do a Blob remake or a Blob sequel to 88, because Chuck Russell's a god. And then I need a Haunted World of El Super Beasto 2 for my animated love. You know?
He would do really well in Chainsaw, except he's done so much with the family from House of Thousand Corpses. It feels like he's done his version of Chainsaw. So I wonder how much more he do, but his Friday the 13th would be, who knows what that would look like.
Seriously. But here's the thing, they keep making more Texas Chainsaw movies, and they never given the saddle to Rob Zombie, who's kind of perfected the formula outside of anybody else since Tobe Hooper.
It might be like the Bond franchise. They have to keep it a certain way, and so they can't deviate from it. So they have to do this and this and this. And they know he'd do something avant-garde or bizarre. So I don't know.
I need like a A24-esque Rob Zombie spliced film version of like Village of the Damned / Children of the Corn. I need something like that from Rob Zombie. You know, I don't know. I've recently watched those, and I'm like, yeah, I need Rob Zombie to do something demented with kids like that. That sounds weird to say on air.
Purge movie. If he did a Purge movie, him or Cronenberg doing a Purge movie and really leaning into it, in that the crazy psychology of those films, I'd see that too. So,
yeah, especially with the Forever Purge, it's kind of isolated. He could totally do an isolated hillbilly-esque kind of Purge movie. That'd be awesome.
Or he could do it like High Rise. You never know what he'd do. So
you must know I love the Purge films, because like I binged through that unintentionally during Halloween, and it's like one of my favorite all-time franchises now. Like I love it.
It's a weird franchise. So they really understand what's going on in a weird way. So
yeah, it's like modern horror movie franchises. It's like the Purge kind of saved me from the pits of hell.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna, but there's some stuff that I see and I'm just like, oh, that's the fourth in a franchise. I don't understand why they made one past the first. But then with Purge, you're like, they just keep nailing. It's like some of the Saw movies where you're just like, oh, there's nothing left here. There's nothing left. And then you see it and you're like, oh, there is. There is a weird idea that you're chasing down a rabbit hole that you as an audience member don't see, but Bousman or whoever is like, oh yeah, here's something else I'm going to do. So,
oddly enough, for horror franchise movie icons to go in space, it's only been Jason and the Leprechaun when the Leprechaun goes to space.
Hellraiser 4 Bloodlines, one of the 3 overlapping plot lines is Pinhead in space.
Holy shit. So, no way.
Because they're building a satellite that in the third part transforms into Lamarchan's box to catch Pinhead in space. So
okay, I'm gonna nerd out, but could you imagine if Rob Zombie got a hold of Clive Barker's like mind and did a Hellraiser movie, that would be like a rated X horror movie.
Yeah.
That would
But
be
there's
awesome.
so many other, like,
they're still making
Zombie
them.
doing Weave World, Zombie doing anything, but Zombie doing In the Hills, the Cities, which is a very quiet, very staid until you have villages turning into giants attacking each other. There's so much insane stuff in Barker's work that I do think Zombie would make a really interesting director for that.
Yeah. Another director, not to just kind of go off the coattails, because he also did a sequel and you mentioned him earlier. You talk about Mark Duplass being in your class while you were too busy dozing off and slacking off in college. Mark Duplass did the Creep 2.
Creep, yeah.
Yeah. Which one of my previous guests, Philip Yount from the Dead Ringers podcast, he loves those movies.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Duplass, I love his works. I think he needs more work in Hollywood besides his independent stuff. I could see him doing something like an Invasion of the Body Snatchers of some sort.
Yeah.
You know, something like sophisticated with a little bit of comedy. Totally could see him doing something like that.
It's funny because he was nominated today for Globe for acting in Morning Show. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There's that entire second half of his career that's acting, and he's a wonderful actor. And you're like, yeah, direct more stuff, do this. But no, he's perfectly happy also acting.
Yeah, I love him and his brother's works. I think they're great stuff. But like, let's get back to Friday Part 5 for a second. Like I said, I didn't realize this movie was so hated when I first was watching it. It's only after I watched it and did research, people were like so visibly upset with this movie. They just bashed it because it's not Jason.
Yeah,
but he's
the
in
Roy
the
one.
movie.
Yeah,
Right. And I still really enjoyed it. And this movie made bank. Like this movie was like a box office hit. It basically probably the money made from this movie funded the rest of the franchise after. But I mean, if I saw this movie opening weekend, I would have thought, oh, this is so good. You know, it would have been something like, I mean, I don't know how you follow like the modern horror franchises, how it is today, but like with Halloween Kills, you know, where that's going, the Texas Chainsaw franchise and stuff. You know, like they make a lot of money, but like it leaves fans with like weird tastes in their mouths. And then like on Twitter, it's divided. I wonder.
That's why I like the Chucky series on Sci-Fi, where it's Mancini and David Kirshner, and it's the same people back doing their own weird Chucky stuff. I'm like, great, have fun, do your weird Chucky stuff. That's awesome. People love it. So
yeah, it's weird. Like it's weird that how horror movies can be different, and I feel like it's so. I don't know if it's just because I'm on Twitter all the time or something, but it feels like either a horror movie. The biggest problem is it's too different, like something like a Friday the 13th Part 5 can be, and people don't like it. But like now we crave such different things in franchise horror movies. We need something different to stand out. You know, each installment needs to stand out for us to enjoy. But it feels like now a lot of horror movie franchises are almost kind of being like cookie cutter blueprint by the numbers. You know, I would crave a movie to be like a Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, where it's just so different. It takes fans in different directions. It includes different subgenres outside of the horror genre. That would be totally great. Like Halloween Kills kind of opened that up for me. And I have friends who really like the movie, and it's because it's the most recent horror movie. It's for me it's the only pinpoint version. I can bring out different ones, but it's just like with your horror movie franchises, if the independent indie stuff is actually better than that, there's a serious problem. And I feel like with A New Beginning, we would kill for something like that. Now I feel like,
and that's what's weird. It was still a tiny little, functionally non-union independent film. It's just a couple $1 million made out here in Thousand Oaks. And yet Beverly Hills Cop, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Friday the 13th, keeping Paramount alive in the 1980s. And it's just insane that those two franchises cost tens of millions of dollars. Friday the 13th, with its tiny little connection to its audience, really just blew it out of the water each time. But because there was such audience expectation over time that it wasn't Jason, really just became the reputation of Part 5. And then 6 comes on and is immediately like, no, everything you actually wanted in 5, we have given you in 6. So it helps to delineate the reputation of 5 even more. And 6 kind of goes, and then you have 7, the first Kane one, which is so weird. It's Carrie White, but you can't get the rights, fighting Jason.
Yeah.
There's great kills in it. Kane is amazing in it, but you start going down the path of the supernatural Jason. So it's 5 does mark an ending. And when I come up with my top 5 Friday the 13th, it's number 5 for me. It's I still like part 5, Roy and all, better than 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, reboot, cool, all that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. With everything you said, I think I think it needs to be mentioned. It's almost like the season of the witch effect that Halloween kind of had, but the difference is, in Halloween season of the witch, what do they do? They give you basically Michael Myers after that. What do we get? Like 4's good in the franchise.
4's good. Yeah.
It's not,
but it's not 1 and 2.
No, it's not. And that's about it. But like with Friday the 13th, when they got their season of the witch with this movie, it's kind of like, we're just going to go full on this. We're not just going to bring the character back or anything. They're just like, we're going to just give you everything about, what you liked about this, which is weird because Season of the Witch was not well received when it came out. I would say in the last 5 years, Season of the Witch has really come around in a lot of people's rankings for Halloween. But Friday 5 doesn't kind of get that. And as someone who's just recently watched it, I'm kind of wondering why. It's kind of like when people say the Dream Master isn't very good when you think about the Nightmare movies, but like the Dream Master still is pretty enjoyable, and I've come around with Dream Child too.
I have not. So I should rewatch it. There's I'm like first 4, and then I start when Freddy's not scary anymore is when I kind of fall with the series a little. But I mean, when you're a Friday the 13th fan, there's Friday the 13th movies, all other horror films, 200 Feet of Crap, and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So you can enjoy them here and there, but you're still that kid from the elementary school playground who all the other kids are Freddy kids, and you're like, I'll fight you. I'm a Jason kid. So you never lose that. Like, I like the guy with the hockey mask, not the guy with the little fingers who makes the little jokes with Roseanne Barr. I like Jason Voorhees.
Which is funny because one of my earliest like own made like Halloween costumes growing up was Freddy Krueger, because like I love Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2 and 3 so damn much. But Friday the 13th,
the actual popular thinking person's like money invested into making those into big movie. Like that was a big franchise. That was, New Line cared because they didn't have they had Ninja Turtles, they had that. They had to make movies. Paramount's just like, hire that porn guy and here's $2 million and tell no one because it's non-equity and shoot in Thousand Oaks. And double Thousand Oaks for Jersey.
Which is funny. It does feel like it's such like a sleaze studio at the time, because like they're like, what's popular right now? What's gonna get popular? I don't know if they like took a peek at like Dream Warrior's script before it came out, and like Halloween 2 they basically had while copying it but making it kind of different, because it's like main characters with PTSD. You get Jarvis, you get Laurie Strode, you get Nancy, you get Angela from Sleepaway Camp even. This movie has odd like Sleepaway Camp vibes.
It does. You're right.
Yeah. It's like all these guys with PTSD or some sort of like the reason for their surviving this trauma, or like they become the villains. Friday 5 kind of takes that, I don't know if it's copying at the time. I don't know, but like,
I imagine it is. I imagine it's like it worked here. It worked here. It worked here. I mean, Psycho ultimately, where they go with it is abusive mother, son becomes a monster. And Friday the 13th is mommy was looking elsewhere, kid drowns, somehow survives, comes back, kills everybody. So it really is a mother's neglect creates a monster. And so Psycho, Friday the 13th. So.
In all these movies with these characters, like I mentioned, they all have that one like side character that's so into the scene of the time. Like when you think about the punk rocker scene in like, Dream Warriors with that one girl who's like, I'm bad and beautiful, or like, you get the girl doing the robot type dance while listening to David Bowie and The Cure, or Alan Parsons Project, maybe, I don't know, in this movie. You kind of get
Pseudo
that.
Echo was the name of the band, and she's dancing to it. Pseudo Echo. It's one of those, like, they don't have to pay anybody for the license. They probably got the song for like $3 and like a bag of cocaine. So that's how you make that deal.
I imagine if like drugs were legal and then like you could pay movie studio execs with cocaine, more movies would be made.
I'm not gonna like besmirch Universal Studios in the late 70s. But you say that almost like joking that like people weren't paid in cocaine. My first job when I came to LA, there was Cocaine Fridays. I was at .com, and there was like the bathroom where the execs went, where the bonuses were cocaine. I'm like 20. I'm like, I have never seen cocaine before in my sheltered Texas life. And these people are like, oh, it's Friday, time to do rails. And I'm like, it's all true. It's all true. Hollywood is cocaine. Oh my God. So
I swear, you watch 1979 Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer, and you better believe cocaine was a currency in that movie. I love that movie to death. It's one of my top 5 1979 films, but that movie is totally cocaine infested.
Ferrara it's funny because Ferrara is one of my favorite directors.
Same,
when I was
dude.
working in video games.
Where have you been in my life, dude?
So
Jeez.
But I was working in video games doing a Friday the 13th spin-off. It was called Devil's Night, and it was for a Canadian company. And Kane Hodder was did motion capture. He died in the Vivendi Sierra merger. But it was fun to work on because you're showing people movies of how do you motivate somebody to hate everyone? How do you motivate kills? And so I'm showing like High Plains Drifter. I'm showing like Sweeney Todd before there was the Tim Burton, like the old Angela Lansbury, George Hearn, Toronto version, and like stuff like that. But then I'm also like, let's watch a lot of Abel Ferrara. Let's watch not just Ms. 45 and Driller Kill, but like Fierce City, which is such a strange movie, and King of New York, Bad Lieutenant, and like all the weird, and The Funeral, but like all the weird movies where you have bad characters who live by their own kind of life and their own kind of code, and they're murderers and they're cheats and they're monsters, but you can't take your eyes off them.
No,
and
seriously,
Ferrara is such a great filmmaker for that.
He's so good. He's so good. It's like the thing about him, he understands urgency. He understands, I don't want to say just because I wasn't when a word that existed probably then, but he understands like atmosphere and like vibe, like he totally understands the setting and the mood. And he also really like, he puts himself, like when I'm watching an Abel Ferrara movie, I feel like I'm understanding Abel Ferrara's psyche. He feels like he's projected himself in these movies, like King of New York and like Driller Killer. Great double feature. You sense that kind of like that heightened anxiety and this nervousness and scared of like failure, while also acting out violently because you don't know how else to react to those fears that are in your subconscious. God bless those movies also.
Well, they feel like you're just going to die on the streets of New York. You feel like the city is going to eat you. And you love that. Like Fierce City's ridiculous. Strippers are dying, so they hire this guy to fight this guy who's killing with like nunchucks, but you buy into it. You believe that the city's gonna kill Billy D. Williams if you don't stop a guy with nunchucks. And the only guy that can do it is Tom Berenger. And it's so great. The weird ugliness that's similar to Larry Cohen's movies. That you get with a Ferrara New York. So
Abel Ferrara was one psychological horror, like psychological and like induced film, like a la Taxi Driver to ask. He's one movie like that away from being a Scorsese Oscar nominee kind of director. I feel like he could have been that, but
he never wanted to be. He wants to make these movies with Willem Dafoe and Siberia. That 3 people are going to watch and be like, this is what Lighthouse was trying to do in certain ways. I love Lighthouse, but I really like Siberia because Ferrara, as you just said, you get his very niche psyche. He's telling you exactly how insane it feels to be Abel Ferrara, like Lodge Kerrigan, like with Clean Shaven and Keen. You're just like, you're claustrophobically stuck in the mind of Abel Ferrara. And that's
It's very
terrifying.
It's very Polanski-esque, but thank God for Ferreira, he's not a creeper like he was. But he totally
He might
understands
be. I mean, you never know. So
maybe
I would believe any story. Like anybody could walk up and be like, "Here's this horrible story about Ferrara." I'm like, that feels right.
I'm just mad I never got an Abel for Warriors type film. You know, Joe LeCure came out in 79, so did Warriors. He could have done something similar like that. I need like a gang warfare movie besides King of New York. Anyway, go back to Friday 5.
Friday 5.
When I say Bruce Green and you think of Friday the 13th, I didn't know who Bruce Green was, but I did the research and I was like, holy crap, there's no way in hell this kind of guy was in this movie or had any work in this movie. It's kind of like the POD or DOP of Terror Train, you know, where it's like they were attached to such great works, but they also did like a grimy little, you know, horror movie that was low budget.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny about my wife works for Disney, and she'll be working on, makes the Descendants movies and makes, speaking of sequels, she makes the musicals like Zombies and Descendants and all those. And suddenly it'll be, her DP will be Mark Irvin, who was Cronenberg's DP on like all the old films, and Reitman's DP, who was on all the films in the 70s and 80s. And they're coming in with this just loads of institutional knowledge of, oh yeah, we blew up a car like that 30 years ago on this. Here's how you blow up a car and you make it flip that way so the flames go that way towards camera. You cannot replicate that level of institutional knowledge. And it's crazy that as, you know, older filmmakers, they're working on Disney movies in Canada now. So it's just, it's great when you see those survivors who've been around, like the director of Rambo, who like shoots SVU all the time. And you just like, these guys are still out there, like making films and work and doing 1 hour dramas. So it's great when they actually have a career past something, because Steinman's career ended.
Right.
Almost everybody, I mean, Dick Warlock, the stunt guy, kept going, but so many people's careers ended at Friday the 13th Part 5, which is crazy. Insane.
Yeah, it is weird. It's kind of like, okay, thank you for your service. Now you're gone. And we're going to bring in new blood to kind of, you know, pave the way. Kind of what Zito was doing with 4, which he never got the opportunity to do, which would have been good. I wish we got a follow up to 4 from Zito. That would have been awesome. But Bruce Green was the editor on the film. He did Star Wars. He did, you know, Indiana Jones and stuff. Like, I feel like this movie definitely tested his patience though, with all the restrictions and the type of personalities, I'll say, that were on the set. I mean, for a guy like him and like what he was doing at that time as well, it probably felt like he was sent to the detention, you know, room.
Or he was just in-house at Paramount. See, that's what it probably was. There's a guy at Warner's. I'll say his name. If Frank Curiosity was one of those guys where you're just like, well, here's a pile of film, make a movie out of it. Green might have been that guy for Paramount. He might have just been one of the guys who they're like, we need someone to cut this. Mm-hmm. And so he did. And he put it together and he assembled it and they released it and they made a ton of money. And that's why you have certain in-house editors who he has all the great quotes in like Crystal Lake Memories where you're just like, oh, he's the one who doesn't give a fuck. He's the one who'll tell you anything. And it's always, I was doing a panel from Messengers at USC once, and like there's all the people like telling good stories about it and noble stories. And I'm just like, there were 15 writers and 10 different directors and everybody got fired and all this. And the editor was beside me and he suddenly was like, whew, I'm glad you said that. I'm the 3rd editor on this film and here's everything that went wrong. And we're just like, high five. Here's all the stories film students actually need to hear. And the producer who's sitting beside me is just, no, say it's genius and brilliant and everything was great. And we're like, here's where we went wrong. It was amazing.
Oh my God.
That's editors. Editors just are like, I've got my next 10 movies, so who cares? So,
but it's oddly one of the harder jobs I feel like on a film set. Like, I haven't directed a film. I've written a few short films, scripts that are in my H drive. Don't worry. But here's the thing. I feel like an editor is like ultra important. Like, you know, it was almost like, you know, everyone thinks about the director. To me, it's the director is important, yes, but it's the writer, it's the editor, it's the cinematographer, it's the DOP. That's very important when it comes to what makes a movie great. And you see that often now where an editor is ultra important. Like imagine if you don't have an editor on a Nolan film. Imagine if you don't have a good editor doing something like on a Ari Aster set, like heaven forbid you get like a lackluster type. But like for this movie, maybe it's saved for me. Maybe it works so well because of Bruce Green understanding the kind of what the intent of the movie was with also like his experience to kind of make this movie work. I think that's like an often overlooked part of the film set, what it makes a movie great. I think it's kind of overlooked. We kind of take for granted because like when you see an MCU movie or you see like a big blockbuster Michael Bay movie, there's your chime in now. You see a billion names on there and like people forget to like, give a nod or a standing ovation to the editor, the gaffer, the best boy Grip, like these people kind of make these movies.
Well, that's a real question about the editor on part 5. Grip, gaffers, electricians, all those people are on set. Bruce might not have been on set. Steinman might have shot it, brought it to Paramount. Mancuso might have hired Green and he might have done all his work at Paramount. Certain people will cut as they're making the film, but you didn't have that opportunity with film. You have that now with digital and video, much easier. Yeah. If Green, I don't even know if Steinman knew Green when they went into the film. So there might have been the director's assembly, and then it might have been put together by Green and Mancuso on the studio once Steinman was out of the picture. And then you bring in Manfredini because the editors always work very close with the composer, and they might have made what the final film actually is, because I don't know if this, I'm sure it's public, but Marcus Nispel, who directed the Michael Bay Texas Chainsaw Since We're Doing Bay Stories and directed on the Friday the 13th I worked on, Marcus doesn't edit. Marcus makes the film, films everything, has the producers kind of work with the actors, but he's there as a commercial director. He's there to kind of build the movie and the world of the movie, and then take all of that and hand it to Michael Bay and his team at Bay Films and Platinum Dunes to then build everything else. And that's just his process. That's just how he worked. He was there to get the negative and somebody else was going to cut the negative. I don't know, but on like Messengers, there were 2 directors. They were twin brothers, Danny and Oxide Pang. Danny would shoot a day, Oxide would be editing in the hotel room, and they just switch off like that. So they were editing as they went to look for things they could miss. I have no idea if Steinman and Green were working together on set, but it may be, since he had done big Paramount movies before, he was just the guy that they're like, okay, we need an editor for this who's got 6 weeks. And they just shuttled him right in. So
it's a good point.
Who knows?
Based on the special features that Screen Factory produced for this movie, at least how I watched it, it does seem like Steinman was more interested in what this movie would do for his career than like how the movie's final product pushed out. Not to say anything about Steinman. I'm sure he's made very tasteful pornos that I haven't seen yet, but
this was his last film. He never directed again.
Yeah, I feel like
there's weird stuff in Crystal Lake Memories about actresses who worked later who were like, oh yeah, he like hit on me in the auditions and stuff. And you're like, yeah, Paramount might have heard some of that and been like, we're going to go in a different direction for part 6. So
yeah. Speaking of women on the set for this movie, Luanne Voorhees, who ironically has the same last name as the Voorhees family, who is in that infamous scene, the lovemaking scene that would have been like 8 minutes long or whatever, 3 minutes long or whatever. I looked up on my research. She ended up being an educator and then being fired when students found out about her scene in this movie.
That sucks.
That sucks. I mean,
that's tough. So sorry to you out there, wherever you are, Debbie Voorhees. It's funny. I just found I was reading a book just now on 80s punk rocker Alice Bagg, who's in the Bags here in LA. And after her band kind of didn't go, she became LAUSD teacher for like 30 years and like did all of this. None of the kids ever kind of made the connection that she was like this hardcore punk rock singer in LA for a long time. But I guess sometimes, I don't know.
Right.
It's a different time, I guess.
Like, right. This is 1985. She becomes an educator in like the 2000s. And then like, you know, someone like my type of personality goes to Family Video and rents Friday 5 and goes, holy crap, there's my teacher right there. Nude.
Poor Debbie Superie.
Yeah. I mean, she did great in the movie. I thought she was really entertaining. I liked her.
She's funny.
Yeah. She kind of gives
in the breakfast scene. She's funny.
Yeah, she gives a Linnea Quigley-esque type of performance in a way, you know, just like not afraid to be nude, very loud and proud. It's awesome. But yeah, I think also that's one thing about this movie I really like. The characters, the side characters, they all kind of have like a personality, even though they're introduced 2 minutes into the movie and then they die 8 minutes later, you know? It's like, it's weird. Even though like the kid.
Well, the kills start fast.
This movie
in the
moves
other
like,
Friday movies, it takes time.
This movie moves like butter. This movie's butter. It's smooth. Like, it's one of the easiest.
But you do lose
ones.
People. Sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna say you do. I was like, you do lose a lot of people, but like, it's like a fast movie, and it's the same runtime as all the other movies before it. It's weird. It's like that's my problem with the Friday franchise from 1 through 3. Outside of 2, is 2 is so entertaining and engaging. But like for 1 and 3 for me, it doesn't rise above to the occasion. If I'm having a beer, Mark, I am falling asleep 30 to 40 minutes into Friday the 13th part 1 and 3. But I'm not with 2.
I disagree on 3. 1, the problem for me is at this point, I really like the characters so much.
Okay.
That I'm kind of into part 1. For me, 3. I don't know. There's something so weird about 3 and the wonky 3D stuff, with the yo-yos and the snake, that it's kitsch. I enjoy 3. 4, obviously, I like more, but like 3, I like that I like Jason with the hockey mask. I like the actor. I like each of the different Jason actors, but. There's just something really in part 5 where it's Morga, like he's very straight up, but like I forget who is it, CJ Graham, like whoever
he's Hunchback.
It's weird though. Is a monster when he strides out and does the James Bond thing with the harpoon.
Yeah.
Like it's cold. 1, 2, 3, turn, shoot. It's just it starts bringing in the real brutality that's carried through the next 3 films. I really like the kills in 3.
I think 3, that's my weird relationship with 3. It's like I don't care about it too much, but I also know it's probably when people think of Friday the 13th, it's the staple for Friday the 13th, at least in classical sense, because then the Killer Cut came out in 2009. But yeah, 3, it's kind of what I wanted, I guess, for a hockey mask Jason, but I think 4 just kind of solidifies that, but it's also the ending, so it's kind of that weird kind of, you don't get that in a lot of franchise horror movies. But part 4 is kind of a greatest hits. I mean, 6 is ultimately a greatest hits, but 4 really is like it literally is a greatest hits.
Counselor's House, like so many of the kills are repetitious from the first 3 films in 4, but they're the best versions. And Savini really comes back to the franchise and is like, okay, we're going to do crazy stuff, and the kid's going to be in a monster masks, and there's just all the weird stuff in it that just is Zito also, that just makes it, have its own big personality.
I don't have to tell you, when Savini is doing work on a movie, the movie's going to be very entertaining. It's going to be an eye candy galore type of movie. And I kind of missed that presence. I mean, Hannes, obviously he went on and did a lot of better works after that, but with 4, it's just kind of a presence missed, I think 5 though does a good job of like respecting what Savini did with 4 in the special effects, because like the kills in this movie are inventive, they're creative, they're very gory.
And we're not seeing any of them. That's what's interesting. Because it's as chopped up as 7, so you're missing so much of the gore that was shot on set. You're missing so much of the prosthetics, but I think it still works. That Steinman wanted to just squirt blood all over the camera and do all this kind of gory stuff, but I think it works. The suggestion of how horrible these things are, the thrust when he I forget her name, the old woman who lives
Uh-huh.
next door on the farm, and he just smashes her face in the boiling water. She crushes the tomato after getting the hatchet in the face, after decapitating her son on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see all the gore. He wanted to have the head bounce for a while. It's still ugly. It's still fierce. It's still just this nasty, ferocious. This guy's not just killing people, he's doing it brutally.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for it. So
no, that's what's great. And
joy
it's
of
like,
killing.
oddly, she was in Sharky's Machine with Burt Reynolds, which I haven't seen. I've been told to watch it plenty of times, but I just know from my research she was in that. So now I feel like I need to watch it, because I liked her in the movie.
Well, they do the guy who falls out of the building thing from Die Hard that's the end of Sharky's Machine. That's where they stole that from. So.
Okay. God bless Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
But here's the
Talking
thing
about
with
a box office star who used to save studios. I mean, Burt Reynolds.
and in Relevance with Paul Thomas Anderson with his new movie coming out. But anyway, in Friday 5, when I was watching 4 and 5, I forgot I was watching a franchise that was coming out with like the Halloween, the Nightmare movies, and a bunch of other, one-off movies in American studios, not Italian, where the MPAA was probably like overtime working to edit these movies and censor them. I always forget how violent Friday the 13th was in comparison to its competitor franchises.
Well, it was also coming out from a major studio. So you're not having to compete with the Evil Deads and like all the indie movies, the Phantasms, and all the ones that Avco and all of them are putting out like independently. You have a target on your back because you're Paramount. And I think that ultimately might have hurt Friday the 13th because the MPAA was so like, if you hurt Evil Dead, they'll be like, we'll just make Evil Dead 3. If Paramount says, we're not going to listen to your cuts, we're just going to release this however, they'll be like, well, we're going to mess with one of your other franchises. We're going to mess with one of the other 15 movies Paramount has coming out this year. So Paramount had to be very beholden to the MPAA. So they're making wild movies. They get chopped to pieces. And that really happened with 5 and really happened with 7. So
it feels like Friday the 13th was probably like, you hear about the video nasties that were happening in the UK, in Europe. It feels like maybe Friday the 13th was absorbing all of that kind of heat like the UK films were, because I don't feel like Halloween and Nightmare were getting that heavily censored than Friday the 13th was, And maybe
Chainsaw got attacked. Evil Dead got attacked. Oh, what was the other one? There were some of them like Hellraiser. Hellraiser came out X, I think.
Yeah, it
in
was.
America.
And I remember watching it. My eyes
Crazy.
were like bulged. I was just like insane when watching Hellraiser.
And it's not Friday the 13th. It's not kill after kill after kill. It's just this merciless film about sex and blood and horror and experience. It's a beautifully made film. And it's not, to put it side by side with the other kind of films coming out is so weird that the MPAA would look at a Friday the 13th and look at a Hellraiser and say, we have to do the same thing to both movies. So I don't know. I don't think they ever understood Hellraiser. It's too bad.
I just, in the times that we live in now with director's cuts, extended editions of movies, I need like these older, heavily censored movies to come out with re-releases. Like, how many freaking releases of the original Friday the 13th do we get that like it still has Jason on the cover when he's not even in it? Can I get like some of these Friday movies to have? And I know Scream Factory just put out the new box set, but like all these other 80s franchises to get like unrated released cuts. I know they're heavily copyrighted.
They're all gone. Like if you cut on film and you cut it out, that film's in the trash. It's just gone. That's why it's weird with some of the Friday stuff where there's this stuff from like the Japanese Laserdisc on 7. All the stuff that people are like, oh, where's the stuff for 5? It's gone. Once it's out of the film, nobody saved it thinking there'd be a DVD release or any kind of release. This stuff's just thrown in the waste bin in the editor's office. So it doesn't even exist anymore. There's no reason to keep it.
That's so crazy to think.
Yeah, it's like all the Doctor Who's that are just taped over by the BBC. They're like, oh, we aired Doctor Who. we don't need this anymore. Or Beatles recordings where they're like, oh, we aired that already, so we'll record over this Beatles concert that was on the BBC.
Right.
You don't realize that people want an archive of this thing. So here it was.
There you go. Nice. So if I were to ask you, because like you talked about your mentor being Cohen being on this movie, like, how did it feel like being on the set for I don't know what else to call the Friday the 13th remake outside the killer cut. I've always just called it the killer cut. That's what every release says on there. What was it like being on that set for that? Like, obviously growing up.
Oh, I was never on the set. I was fired long before.
Oh, you didn't even think
I got fired before it was shot. Oh, no, not at all. I've only been on the set of 2 things I wrote on, but no, they fired me. Oh, I can do this whole thing. Michael Bay, they weren't, I guess we got a minute. New Line after Freddy versus Jason was like, we're looking for a new take on Friday the 13th. We have no idea what to do. Because Freddy versus Jason was here and they were trying to build up to what's still not made. The 13th Friday the 13th, F13, which would be the next film. Now it's at Friday the 13th part 12. And so they're just looking for pitches. And I came in with a pitch and said, it's all about part 5. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, you need to remove part 5 from the franchise and not supernatural anymore. Have him still be alive. Have him not having gotten killed at the end of part 4. Never have the Roy stuff. Have it be, again, back to Crystal Lake, have like a preamble thing and fix the stuff with Pamela Voorhees to change the timeline, but and make it be where they were going with what the audience wanted from part 5, which is Jason's an urban legend, which he's talked about in 2 and 3. And people know he's there somewhere. So don't go in the woods. And that's it. And so I was like, so just do a new part 5 and do an actual sequel to part 4. And they hired me and I started writing the script. And then Platinum Dunes came in and I was like, okay, I'm about to be fired. But I wasn't. Bay had not seen Friday the 13th. And I got the Monday call of, wait, where's Jason? And I was like, haven't seen Scream? Jason's not in the first one. And they were like, okay, we can't redo, like, there was Platinum Dunes wanted to remake Friday the 13th. New Line before that was like, we'll do his crazy idea of doing a new part 5. Bay hadn't seen the movie, so he saw it and was like, so what do we do? And I was like, okay, remake the first 3. Opening, have it be Pamela Voorhees for 20 pages. She's crazy. She murders all these people. Counselors come in. All these dead. And then they kill her, like the end of Friday the 13th. So Miss Voorhees is out in the first day. Then you remake 2. Have him in the bag. He witnessed the murder of his mother. You do that. End of the second act. They almost kill him like at the end of 2. And he gets the hockey mask. And third act, you got the hockey mask. So everybody's happy. You have this reboot. You've got the mom back. You can kind of remake this. You get the bag. You get the mask. You're like, great, let's do that. So they were like, go to script. They brought Jonathan Liebsman, who was down the hall editing the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel, the beginning. They're like, hey, Jonathan, you should direct this. You know Mark. I was like, we know Mark. Yeah, high five, Jonathan. And we started remaking 1, 2, and 3 as one film, the reboot. And then Paramount was like, wait, you only have the rights to remake the first film. So thus began like a year and a half of litigation.
Oh, man.
And after about 8 months, they were like, you're fired. The next draft will be dictated by lawyers. But there were certain elements that they ended up, which is why I got credit on it. They kept like, oh, it'll be kind of a remake. They'll have the mom, they'll have the bag, they'll have the face, the mask. So they kind of did it. And then that's began Paramount and New Line working together for one film. And there hasn't been one since everybody had first dollar ghost points on it. The movie made nothing. The movie made a lot of money at the box office, but it went right out the door to so many different people because murdering the Boston guys who backed the original film get a chunk, get first dollar. Bay gets first dollar. By the time you divvy up Paramount and New Line, nobody actually made any money on the reboot, even though it was one of the more successful of the film. So people are always talking like the rights are why there's not a new one. The rights are this. It's like, no, the last one made nothing because how many people are contractually obligated to get paid out when a Friday the 13th movie gets made. So
I'm buying
sequels, man.
I'm buying Sleepaway Camp stock right now. I'm buying the share. I need to get paid out with the next one. Oddly enough, why hasn't, I don't know what's going on with New Line Cinema, talking about like rights for iconic 80s horror movies. What's going on in New Line Cinema? Did the remake to Nightmare bomb so bad that we just never are getting another one for a long time?
Probably. New Line was with Warner Brothers. They were like, they were their own independent studio for a long time. And then a lot of things happened. And now they've kind of been subsumed by Warner's. And for a long time, New Line was reduced to making only 2 movies a year. And Emmerich was still kind of running it. And so then that got reduced even more. And New Line still exists, but they are not their own independent entity anymore at all. They are very much subsumed into Warner's, and all people who were there are long gone. And they've got a lot of IP, but the head of New Line is now kind of the president of Warner Brothers, and it's not a priority for them to make. They'll make more Final Destination movies because they want to compete with Conjuring franchises, and they want to compete with the kind of lower budget theatrical, the Nun, the Annabelle, the stuff like that. They want to have movies in that marketplace, but it's not going to be their business right now.
Yeah.
At least.
It's weird from a studio that was part of the arguably the best picture, the greatest best picture winner of all time with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and now they're kind of not doing anything.
Well, he's gone. Shea, the guy who actually rolled the dice on Rings, Bob Shea, like, he was great. He's one of those guys you don't have anymore. It seemed a lot of the people who are kind of running studios and running these are either MBAs from Stanford or Harvard, or they come up through the agencies and are like creations. They're a producer who's a good enough union buster that the agencies are like, oh, we can just feed them product and they'll make all these little movies and they'll be profitable because they'll have half on the streamers and half theatrical. And they'll make all these little foreign deals, output deals, where they're like, we'll have 65 movies over 6 years for German television. And all that money will come in. And so that's what's driving things. Bob Shea liked making movies. And that's gone a little bit. Like, he was a riverboat gambler kind of guy who's like, 2 movies, let's make 3. And I mean, not to besmirch Shea, but I remember being at New Line every so often, and yeah, not sure I can tell this story. But you go down in the parking lot there, and he's had a 3 martini lunch, and he's passed out in his convertible, and you're just like, that's the president of a studio. It's just, he had this huge red convertible car, and he's just like, he drank too much at lunch, and you're like, yeah, nobody's gonna get a Bob Shea meeting this afternoon. That's not who's running the show anymore. Not these crazy boot wearing lunatics like Bob Shea. So I don't know. It's different. So,
yeah. Speaking of different, you're kind of built different. We were talking off the mic, and I think it's really interesting that this is a sequel podcast, and we just talked about Howling 2, and then you add extra info about your relation to someone from Howling 2 before we even started recording.
No, I was just saying that Sybil Danning used to live in Laurel Canyon. It's funny because Laurel Canyon, I now live in the Valley, but when we lived in Laurel Canyon for like 10 years, it's like, it took me years to realize that 3 doors up was the house where Robert Mitchum got busted for pot and like got arrested. And you're like, oh, the mailbox is the same from that picture where he's being carted out. And you just see, there's all the Hollywood history of, oh, that's Frank Zappa's old house, and then Sybil Danning, there was like a concert some guy organized in the neighborhood, and you just turn and you're like, oh, okay, so this is one of my neighbors. And it's just really neat that, and Toby Hooper used to be one of my neighbors. We used to go to the same grocery store. And I remember when Christmas, here's how you relate it to Christmas. I remember being at Ralph's, and he was with Amanda Plummer at the time, And he's got his Christmas tree and they're so happy. And he's putting his Christmas tree on his car and they're like, yay, it's Christmas. We have a tree and we're going. It's the fun of being a horror nerd who's tangentially somewhere involved in Hollywood, because you're around everybody who this is their job. And you never know who's going to walk in the door. And you're just like, some days it's Sybil Danning and some days at Ralph's it's Toby Hooper. So
he's probably buying baked beans.
What?
He's probably buying baked beans, probably too.
Yeah, poor Toby.
Yeah.
It's sad because I used to see him at parties where he'd walk in and look around and leave.
Oh.
He wasn't a very social person. So he was not a big like Coscarelli is talking to people. Like he wasn't that guy. So.
Yeah, but he made such amazing works that we all appreciate. So yeah,
Chainsaw is so weird. It's
in the Funhouse. In the Funhouse. In the
Funhouse is weird too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
man, dude. So do I dare ask you to rank your Friday movies? I feel like I could possibly, but I feel like I'm cheating because I still haven't watched Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh, I could do 4 is my number 1. 3 is probably my number 2. Then probably 2, 1, 5. And then on the back half, I have no idea. It probably goes straight down the line, like 6, 7, 8, 10, because 10's great. 10 is so weird. I really like 10. I was in the first test screening of 10 and was like, this movie's amazing. They didn't release it for like 2.5 years. 9, where it's the demon worms, is not my favorite. Freddy versus Jason. I didn't the way they changed Jason. Freddy versus Jason to me is not a Friday the 13th movie because they changed Jason to fit Freddy.
Yeah.
So it's a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that happens to have a version of Jason in it. So I don't really put it on the list. So I don't know. So I guess 4, 3, 1 and 2 kind of alternating, then 5. So,
I think for a top 5, just to be safe, I would definitely go. I would say it's probably 2. Then I would say, oh God, I really got to think about it. It'll go 2, 4. I'll put 6, 5, and then 1. I think that's my top 5.
And then the rest.
Yeah. Then the rest, because I don't know. 3 might be a close swap with 5 and 6, maybe purely numerically reasons, but that's how I probably rank it. But yeah.
Well, the end of 3 is good. Like the back half of 3 is close to what they're doing in 4. So
yeah,
there's a lot of good in the back half of 3.
Yeah, it's just the same thing with 1. You know, the last 30 to 45 minutes is pretty good stuff. You know, I just got to get through the first hour. But other than that, man, Mark, dude, thank you so much for being on here, dude.
Thanks for having me.
It's
fun to talk about Friday the 13th and sleazy movies and 80s. So
right, just be happy I didn't bring up more Vinegar Syndrome boutique label collecting and vintage porn that they have on there. I think we did enough of that with Doug McCambridge before. When is Doug McCambridge? If there's a podcaster that I know that's good to do a Friday the 13th movie, it's probably Doug McCambridge. It'll be just as sleazy as Steinmetz to slander a guest I just had on. But no, man, Mark, seriously, dude, this means a lot for you to be on this podcast. I never thought I'd have someone like you on here. Someone I used to watch on my TV, on my old LG TV on my parents' house, and just watch the bonus features on random Saturday mornings, and seeing you talk about old zombie movies and talk about how, you know, zombie movies when Romero came out were sick and gross and they were going to eat your flesh. Like I remember that, like that carried me from sophomore year to community college. Like just that bonus features and that kind of passion for movies. I aspire one day to be on bonus features of a sleazy, you know, horror movie, and my title captions horror guru, you know, like
is that what he said for me? That's amazing.
No, he just said he just said Paul W.
Local
Anderson.
moron. Yeah.
No, I like to think you didn't look as good as Paul W. Anderson because he's wearing a sleek black turtleneck. Oh, to be fair.
He's one of those underrated filmmakers that, like, I hate that someday there's going to be all these kids who are like, why did everyone ignore this very strange filmmaker who was making all these movies for decades and being like, oh, he just makes this? No, he's got this insane body of work that he's just like, here's what I make.
Sure. I will say Resident Evil Retribution and Final Chapter aren't as strong as Apocalypse and Extinction or Afterlife, but I will say I was on my buddy's podcast, Daniel's Appler's podcast, Cobwebs, where we did we went through the whole month. We talked about the Fly box set from Scream Factory. We went through all the Fly movies, and there was a question asked if there's one filmmaker you can meet. Both of them were like, oh, well, Cronenberg is definitely one I would talk to. And I was like, Paul W.S. Anderson is someone I want to sit down and talk about movies with, because he seems like someone that I would have been friends with growing up and just got lucky and got to make movies for the rest of his life. Because I agree with you. He is one of those, he's on the tier of like Rob Zombie, where he's just like, he needs more work. He's underappreciated for sure. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, it's good. Soldiers. I mean, there's so many weird films that show off what you were saying about Ferrara, not as much, but you see the personality, you see this idea in there of what he really likes. And there's so many filmmakers that are blank now that feel like they came out of making a Dodge Ram commercial, and they could just as happily be making a Chevy ad for the Super Bowl as they could be for making, I don't know, Thor movie. So it's very blank directing without the kinks of a weirdo behind the thing. You're kind of like, anybody could have done this. So
I'd love Paul W.S. Anderson to keep doing video game adaptation films. I hope he does a Dead Space movie. That would be awesome. Going back to your roots of Event Horizon.
Another movie chopped to pieces. So,
there you go. We keep talking about boutique labels on here, but no, Mark, seriously, dude, to talk to you and have you on here, it really means a lot. And I hope to have you back on here again. I think it sounds like I if you're interested,
reach out to Todd Farmer, the writer of Jason X. Get him on here talking Friday the 13th. He'll tell you the opposite of everything I just said.
We'll get you both on here. Just be you two bickering, and then me just kind of grinning on camera, being like, yeah. There you go.
Cool.
All right. Well, Mark, like I said at the beginning, for people who don't know, you're a published author. If people want to reach out to you and check out your works, where can people find you at, man?
Goodreads.com. Just type in Mark Wheaton and you'll see this sad person who's like, yeah, read my stupid books. But yeah, I'm on there. I get messaged there. Twitter, I guess. I check nothing because I just type all day and take my kids to school. And I'm really bad at social media, but Goodreads, people find me, I guess. So
yeah, you're a real suburban dad to get a hold of right now.
I am such. I embrace the weird dad. Like all the kids are like, Dad's a chiropractor, and it's like my dad's cuff is like covered in horror movies, and you're like, I don't know. So.
Well, man, like I appreciate you being on here. Give me the time, and I hope people check out your stuff because I think your stuff's great. And for those who are listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you've been enjoying this month's lineup so far with Howling 2. Now we just finished talking about Friday 5, A New Beginning. I totally recommend you revisit that movie and give us your thoughts down below. Mark, thank you again for being on here, man. And I just want to tell everyone. No problem. Like I said, I want people to say, I want them to, think about this in their head. If you aren't rewatching Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, do you really care about cinema? Anyway, we'll see you next time.
It's true.